Hello and welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live on the evolution of next gen customer engagement platforms. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Do let us know where you're joining us from. We will give everyone a minute before we begin the LinkedIn Live. Uh, in the meantime, to for those who have joined to keep you busy, uh, so we have a quick fun thing. Durga and Rohit, quick question to you. What is your recommendation for a new web series that someone should watch? And people in the audience, if you have a recommendation, do let us know.
So I think I'm the last person one should ask for web series recommendation, but given I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, I should say Rings of Power. It's slightly underwhelming than you would expect it to be, but still good.
Uh, I think these questions are becoming more and more creative as we do more LinkedIn lives. So, not a really new web series, but it is something that I've been binge watching while I'm having my meals. Not a great practice, but yes, I think Modern Family is something that I'm hooked on. And I think everyone would know how good that one is. So, yeah, that is something that is keeping me busy these days.
Okay, no interesting suggestions then.
What about you, Pinky? Maybe you can
There are
drop in.
there are none from me. I have a toddler, so we have significantly cut down on her screen time. But I recently watched the House of Dragon season 2, and yeah, I thought it was good. But okay, I think so. For people who just joined in, yes, you have joined in the right LinkedIn Live. Again, welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live on the evolution of next generation customer engagement platforms. I am Chunky Satija, and I'm joined by two of our experts in the commercial life sciences commercial space. So we have Durga and Rohit. Uh, and again, you recognize the three of us from previous LinkedIn lives on this topic, right? But we've done a few in these series. So in the last one, which we did in the first half of this year, we talked about the then recently announced Salesforce and IQVIA partnership announcement. We also talked about what are some of the latest things that we were seeing back then in the life sciences commercial space. We talked about Gen AI and a few other things. And today we'll continue the conversation. We'll talk about what have been the latest developments in the 6 months. As we're also coming close to the end of the year, we'll also talk about what we expect from 2025. And if you've just joined in, do let us know where you've joined us from. All three of us are actually in the same office in different meeting rooms in Gurgaon. So let us know if you've joined in, who you are, and where you've joined us from. I already see Claude joining from Portugal. Hey, Claude, nice to have you on this LinkedIn Live as well. Uh, so let's start with the first discussion point, right? Which is what's been really going on in the life sciences CRM market. I think clearly it's an exciting time for the industry with Viva, Salesforce parting ways, then Salesforce and IQVIA partnering, then Salesforce launching their life sciences cloud. So clearly, there's a lot that has happened. There've also been big events. So Salesforce launched their life sciences cloud in June. Viva had their commercial summit recently. So let's maybe start from here. Durga, I know that you covered the Viva commercial summit quite closely. What were your major takeaways from the event?
Sure, Chunky. So I think before that, I'm sort of glad that this has become a ritual for us in the commercial technology space, to have a LinkedIn Live and really discuss what's been happening in the market. Every time we've been doing a LinkedIn Live, there's always been a key event right around the corner. Last time it was Salesforce IQVIA partnering, and this time it was right after Dreamforce. So definitely interesting time, coincident though, but still interesting. So, all right, coming to I think the Viva Summit, definitely a lot of interesting announcements that we've seen, but I'd probably highlight two things that really stood out to me, right? One is I think Viva's definitely not taking a DIY approach. It's not doing it everything themselves, right? So a good indication is to see the number of niche providers that they are partnering with. And I think to name a few, there's been their partnership with Odaya, SpotMe, Acto. And if you notice type of players, it's very different. Like I think SpotMe's focus on management side of the house, Acto's initial focus on learning management side of the house now evolved. It's so interesting to see these partnerships, Viva and the emerging commercial technology providers shows that I think Viva definitely right now we can all agree, not just Viva, no provider has everything that enterprises want in this, customer engagement landscape that we are looking at. And Viva's attempt to make it happen for its customers through the partnership approach is something that really stood out to me, right? I think second one is sort of a continuation to what I mentioned in my first point is the partnership focus from a AI standpoint. So I think just couple of weeks before the Viva Summit, we also announced that AI partner program, and we already see 11 partners on the list, right? Which says a lot about the partnership lens that Viva is bringing to the table. And not just Viva, I think everyone is jumping on this particular opportunity just because how interesting it's been, right? So I think these two things definitely stood out to me from the Viva Commercial Summit.
Great, Durga. And I think the partnership thing that you mentioned, do you think it's like a continuation of their stance? Do you see something different that they're doing now compared to before? I think in some ways they've been like they've had extensive service provider partnerships, but on the product provider side, is it something new that you think they're doing?
So, great question. I think I was reflecting on that, right? But if you look at their partnerships earlier, the focus was more on the SI side of the house. That's who can help implement, maintain, manage the platform for Viva, right? But I think the nature of partnerships in the recent past has definitely changed. It's sort a lot of frenemy relationships being formed, right? So a lot of the niche providers do not necessarily play in the CRM market. They are in, again, going back to our equation probably, right? So the way we define this market is CRM plus CP is our future commercial technology stack. Where these niche providers come into the picture is the customer engagement side of the house. So it's nicely fitting in that equation where brings its strong suit of CRM, definitely has some bit of CP focus as well, but not so much. And now it's looking at its partner ecosystem to plug that gap so that they're able to build that future commercial technology stack, right? And I think I wouldn't say this is unique to Viva in itself. I think it's also common for a lot of other providers, Salesforce, and even some of the other emerging cohort as well.
And what do you also make of their recent announcements around uh, migration? So we know that Bayer, GSK, Novo Nordisk had already committed to World CRM. I think they also announced that the first major big pharma migration, they expect that to complete by the end of next year. Like any reflections do you have on that? Anything more that you saw in the recent summit?
So I think we are an industry where we want to lead by example. So I think these are some of the first movers in a lot of way. So it's good to see that these are out there, like made those commitments, right? But I think I will wait for them to be truly complete because I think that's one of the pitfalls which enterprises also want to keep an eye out for successful implementation at a global scale. Is that possible without any potential roadblocks, challenges? That's the question that's to be answered.
Great. And just before I talk about some of the other players in this industry, I wanted to say that I think this is a more global LinkedIn Live. So we have users joining from the US, North Carolina, Florida. We have people joining in from Portugal. We have uh, people joining in from Nigeria. So, hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. So we talked about Viva, right? I think it's all makes sense for us to also talk about Salesforce, given their uh, I think recent major announcement, their event in June around their launch of the Life Sciences Cloud. Rohit, I know you've been covering this quickly. You also authored a report which covered the launch. Same question for you, right? What stood out for you? What is something that you would want this audience to know?
Sure. I think just to start the banter, I think I got the more interesting bit between the Viva Salesforce. I got to cover the Salesforce bit, and Durga got to cover the old, boring Viva bit. So I think a lot of interesting announcements. I'll keep this short. Some things that stood out for me, right? Number one was the theme around end-to-end customer engagement. This theme is close to all of our hearts, right? Especially people you see on the screen. So this is the theme that we have been driving in our thought leaderships, in our strategic engagement discussions. So it was very logical, and I would say also a little bit clever on how these incumbents there started pivoting away from the traditional CRM positioning. And on similar lines, Salesforce is choosing to call its life sciences cloud as an end-to-end customer engagement platform and not a CRM. And they're trying to include clinical, commercial, medical, patient services, so on and so forth, and they're extending it beyond pharma and medtech to include consumer health, animal health, and other relatively non-core life sciences domains. While all these platforms, they were serving these other domains, so to speak, but never did they call these out very loudly. Never did they call about bringing in synergies between different functions, different domains. So I think that stood out for me, how the theme of building an end-to-end customer engagement platform is a centerpiece. Second thing which stood out, this is similar to what Durga mentioned for Viva, is focus on AI. This will not come as a surprise that Salesforce has gone all in promoting and integrating its Einstein AI across all clinical and commercial workflows. You name it, patient recruitment, patient enrollment, sales rep operations. They have Einstein AI everywhere. See, tech capability, in my opinion, was never a point of doubt with Salesforce products, but understanding the domain nuances and tailoring its products, its functionalities according to that, that was always debatable. So, looking at the roadmap, looking at some of the announcements coming out, looking at some of the early demos in the events, I think things look promising on Salesforce front as well.
Great, thanks, Rohit. And we'll also talk about some of the other players in this area, right? Because I know that whenever we're talking about the life sciences CRM market, I know that a lot of time, or at least a lot of people are talking about Viva or Salesforce, right? But there are a few other players here. But before I ask a question to one of Durga and Rohit, I have a question for the audience, right? Who do you think is uh, or which is the CRM player that you think is best positioned to serve the life sciences market? So, with that being said, uh, Rohit, did you also want to talk about? Uh, so, I think continuing with the discussion of the Salesforce Life Sciences cloud launch, maybe shed some more light on what did we actually see in terms of launch of what capabilities. And then let's also turn our attention to, other than Viva and Salesforce, who are some of the players that you see? What is something that unique that you think that they bring in?
Sure, Chanki. I think the graphic that we have here, this summarizes majority of things around Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud announcement, not the actual cloud. So I think, like we discussed, the key themes coming out of the entire long launch. One is end-to-end customer engagement. Second is they going full in on breaking silos within commercial and clinical. So it was encouraging to see that they're not only talking about breaking silos within commercial, but they're trying to break silos within the entire different parts of the value chain. And the third most important thing, I think they are targeting the North Star of personalizing all engagements, be it internal stakeholders, be it stakeholders on clinical side, be it stakeholders on patient engagement side, or be it stakeholders on customer engagement front, the HCPs. I think these were the broad themes. which I could see when I was covering this event. And while I would have loved to see a lot more commercial focus modules going live or becoming generally available in the announcement or in the roadmap, but I guess they have saved it for 2025. So as such, only the clinical focus modules as of today is what is generally available, and their unified platform is the same platform that they were already using. They're just plugging it in the cloud, and the customer engagement piece, which is also the topic of our live. I think that is something that will go live next year.
Great, Rohit. And I think before you talk about some of the other players other than Viva and Salesforce, it seems like I think even our audience can't decide who they feel is best positioned. So come on, people in the audience, let us know who you feel is best suited to serve the life sciences market. So whether it's Viva, Salesforce, or others like Exivo, Trueblue, Pitcher, or someone else, let us know what you think. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a controversial question for starters, Chunky. So I'm sure publicly giving out that opinion is something people are holding back from.
yeah, maybe a controversial question. But okay, let's continue our discussion, right? So Rohit also talked to us a little bit about like other than Viva and Salesforce, who are some of the others that we encounter when we speak to pharma customers, and what stands out for them.
Sure, Chunky. I don't think this is a lot controversial for us. I think we have been covering this space, I think for 2 to 3 years now. We have a couple of assessments out. So I think surely top of my mind, Exivo, Trueblue, Picture in parts, and some of the other platforms which are focusing on certain niche areas such as Actana, VizAI, VizEven. So these are some of the top names that pop in my head, which are not only now emerging, but they're also sort of challenging some of the incumbents. Maybe not in the entirety of it, but in whatever these platforms are doing, in those spaces, they are bringing in strong challenge. So if I think about what has changed or how they are becoming even more prominent as we speak in 2024, I think first is they are repositioning from being quote unquote regional platforms to becoming contenders now. Some of these platforms, they are expanding or coming out of their home territory, and they're trying to go global. For a long time they were considered as regional or more localized. They were considered as alternatives to the three incumbents, but now that positioning is gradually changing, and we can see that when we speak with some of the buyers, there are cross references, and some of these platform names have started coming up even outside of what I labeled as their home territories. So yeah, I think that is one thing that I am seeing changing from late 2023 to now.
Okay, and just looking at the comment, there are two votes for Salesforce, and there are I think there's a comment and there's a question as well. So maybe let's go to the comment first that is coming from Claude. So where he says that picking one CRM in life sciences is tricky, and he would say that there's a need for adaptation across the verticals and regions, and that a one size fits all mindset may not work. And I think which is true. I think this is like in conversations with some of the pharma companies. I think this is like at least some of them. I won't say all. Some of them are thinking in this direction where they know that there are certain markets like China where others like where let's say someone has better capability. So I think definitely there's a region aspect to it. I think there's also a functional aspect to it. So while again Viva Salesforce, I think would definitely be adopted by sales and marketing. There are other functions like medical affairs, market access, where we see again some of the other players feature more prominently compared to sales and marketing. So I think I agree with Claude what you've mentioned here. Uh, there's also a question. The question is how are platforms balancing personalized experiences with privacy concerns and data protection using AI? I think that's a very good question. Rohit, Durga, any one of you wants to answer that question?
maybe I can take a first stab and maybe Durga can follow. So, very valid point, right, Robert? So, what we have seen is both enterprises and even the platform providers being cautiously optimistic while going after these next gen functionalities, or while diving into the next gen data related capabilities, because of the reason that you pointed out, privacy, data, how to go about it. So while they are building solutions there, so this is something that they are keeping in mind while doing it. So a quick example is, right, when we looked at Gen AI and how it has changed the entire marketing or content creation, content supply chain space, we don't see that exactly replicating for life sciences, because there are n number of checks and balances, there are compliances to look at. So I think both enterprises and providers, they are very mindful of how and where to implement these next gen functionalities and technologies.
And I think just to sort of add to what Rohit said earlier, whenever we used to talk about these digital tech like AI, now Gen AI, there was always, especially in this particular industry, there's always been a huge concern around privacy and security, right? So that almost was a reason in a lot of ways for the industry to not embrace it. But I think that's no longer an option in a lot of ways, right? So you need to adopt these technologies because your customer is really wanting personalization, and that's not possible without embracing these things. So it's now more of a solve for it mindset rather than mull over it in a lot of ways. So definitely I think balanced approach is needed, but it's no longer a reason to stop innovating, at least.
Okay, so thanks everyone for the comments and the questions. I think it's also time to move to our next section, right? So we've talked about what are some of the latest things that we've seen in the CRM market. Now let's turn our attention to what we see pharma companies do, right? And Durga and Rohit, before I bring you in, I want to maybe lay out what I am seeing and then maybe have you react to it, right? So uh, over the last, I would say, let's say, I think since the start of this year, right, the discussion that I've had with a lot of pharma companies, what I think I've picked up is there are broadly, I would say, there are three categories where these organizations fall. So there is one category which is still thinking about what do they really want from their future commercial tech stack, right? So that's first category, who's still thinking about what should our future tech stack should look like. Then there's the second category who figured out what they want from their tech stack. Now they're thinking about who is the platform vendor who's best suited to help them achieve that vision, right? So, and they're evaluating Viva, Salesforce, and others as well. Then there's a third category who has done the first two. So they've thought about what they want from this tech stack. They have either already selected or have a very clear point of view on which platform provider are they going to go with for like all of the CRM functionalities and other functionalities as well. But they've also encountered that there are functionalities that they won't get irrespective of whether they select Viva or Salesforce. And for a lot of those, let's say, experience or engagement related functionalities, they know that there are other maybe niche players that they would need to engage with, right? So where they are is trying to figure out, okay, what is our, let's say, a base platform, and what are some of the other providers that we need to work with, right? So maybe I'll first open it to both of you, right? Is from your interactions, do you see things in a similar way? Are there any differences to what you see?
So I think Chunky very perfectly laid out. I would say it's almost like the journey of every enterprise as they make these decisions, right? So, in my opinion, a lot of them are still in stage one. There are few the first movers who moved to stage two, and also parallelly figuring out stage three. But I think stage one is where most of enterprises are still figuring it out, what's that future commercial technology stack, right? And there's also a very valid reason behind it. I mean, like I think we were discussing in our past LinkedIn lives, these are decisions that enterprises make once in a decade, right? It's not like we make these decisions every now and then. So there's almost a lot of well thought out process going in to figure out what's my stack going to look like. I think to Claude's earlier point as well, how does it vary by region? How does it vary by my functions? What are my needs? Truly taking a deep dive into what are the enterprise needs and trying to understand who's offering what in the supply side and accordingly plugging in the gaps as well, right? So again, I think very well laid out, and in my opinion, people are still figuring out the question of what should my future commercial technology stack look like.
So then let's start from there, right, Durga? I know that this is something that we've covered in our previous LinkedIn lives. So maybe for people who've not attended those, can you give a quick summary of the first category, which is still thinking about what they want from their commercial tech stack? What are some of the things which are very important for them?
Absolutely. I think this is I think this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. But I think the commercial model that we are in is hybrid, right? Like I think all of us can agree to it that it's no longer just in-person traditional based selling. It's a good hybrid model with a good component of digital in it. So I'll typically we have five key tenets to describe this, but I'm just going to limit myself to describing this in a few statements. So the very first thing is really understanding your customer preferences, and that too in a very real time and a dynamic fashion, right? So having a true understanding of your customer preferences across digital, non-digital touch points, and how are you leveraging those preferences to orchestrate a personalized customer journey, right? And keep in mind when I'm talking about customer journey, that is orchestrated by all the commercial functions in absolute sync, right? It's not a journey created by sales function or a marketing function. It's a journey that's created by all the functions working together. And for that to truly happen, and we can again all safely agree that the current CRM customer engagement platforms out there don't really have everything that enterprises needed. And again, we were also discussing about the gaps bit, right? So how do you sort of help your enterprises digitally augment their existing tech with more of these experience and engagement type functionalities? Again, more real-time customer insights. Also, sort of upskilling your sales reps and MSLs to for sales reps to have more domain-centric conversations, for MSLs to have maybe more business-centric conversations. How do you make that happen, right? So digitally augmenting them with the relevant tools so that they have access to customer insights, at their fingertips. And I think finally, the last most important piece is how do you take the feedback that a lot of your enterprise stakeholders are receiving, be it sales reps, MSLs, marketing person, and how do you, in a very dynamic fashion, feed that into your overall product strategy, right? I think that's a missing piece. I'm sure a lot of tech providers struggle with this challenge of how do you enough times give alerts to your sales reps to make sure that data is ensured that it's inputted back into the system, right? So that's the last mile piece. How do you take care of that? So I think real time positive feedback loop is really critical to make sure that you are actually building those personalized customer journeys because the preferences are changing a lot. So I think that's in a business language, not necessarily in a tech language. What are the enterprise expectations from a future commercial technology stack?
And this is I think, the shortest version of it that I've heard. So thank you, Durga. Okay, so Durga, the next question is also for you, and I know that you've been working with some pharma companies and advising them with, I think, one of the biggest questions that they have right now: should we go with Viva? Should we go with Salesforce? Should we go with others? So I think the question to you is: can you summarize for us, like, what are some of the sourcing criteria that these organizations are using, and try not to breach any NDAs while you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. So, all right. I think this is one of the key questions that we've been getting a lot from enterprises as well, right? As we receive a lot of questions, what is, because even in a lot of ways they are unclear about what should they be looking at while evaluating a lot of the platform providers, right? Because it's also evolving, it's also dynamic in nature. But I think there are a few things that one should definitely keep an active eye out for. One is the enterprise's current investment in these incumbent platforms, be it Viva, Salesforce. What's their fundamental core technology investment like, right? So that's going to play a good or a bigger role. Second is, again, it's not, this is an initiative that's going to at one point in time become global, become enterprise wide. So what's the pricing construct that a lot of platform providers are bringing to the table, not just for like, a one-off implementation, but thinking more long term, right? Thinking global, thinking enterprise wide. Thirdly, it's, we all agree that we do not know what's the definition of the future commercial technology stack. So, what's the vision like, right? What's that future strategy like? And how are they planning to get there? So, in every platform provider's definition of the future commercial technology stack is also something enterprises are looking for, because they want to understand their, or rather, they want to put together their own definition of the future commercial technology stack, right? And the fourth one is the partner ecosystem. I think we've talked about you can't do it all yourself. So, do they have the right partner ecosystem, both on the AI side, be it on the SI side? Do they have the right partnership ecosystem that can orchestrate things that they are not able to bring to the table as of today, right? And I think lastly, again, I talked about how we are an industry that typically we lead by example. uh, any examples of enterprises who have already made this choice, those sort of become an icing on the cake. I wouldn't say these are like fundamentally needed, but it's always good. I think in our industry, everyone doesn't want to take the first step. So they like to be nudged, or they would want to see someone else do it first.
Thank you, Durga. So we've talked about the first two categories. Rohit, let me come to you for the third category. So this is where they've identified who their main platform is going to be, but now what they're doing is figuring out what is that entire ecosystem, how do they stitch that entire ecosystem. And I know that you've done a lot of research on this recently. Uh, and before I come to you, maybe the same question to the audience as well. Are there any niche players that you think that are doing something very unique? And while I think people in the audience answer that, Rohit, can you also talk us through what are your thoughts on this space?
Sure, Chunky. I think we can talk at length, how Viva is building its ecosystem, Salesforce or other emerging platform providers are giving an end-to-end vision or value prop for enterprises. But in all the research, in majority of conversations with enterprises, one thing stands out, that there still are gaps. And while some of these emerging platforms or players, which we mentioned a while back, Exebo, Trueblue, Vizai, Octana, a lot of these providers, they were very niche, they were very small. I think 2 to 3 years back when we did the first report in this category, which was the trailblazers. And it is very encouraging to see, as these platforms have matured and they have now started competing with the incumbents, there is even a bigger wave of these new emerging niche platforms coming up. That is where we did the second trailblazer in this category. So it was a twin objective behind that research. One was obviously to identify who these next generation platform or providers are. Second was also to see how they are challenging some of these white spaces, how they're trying to fill this up. And normally for this kind of assessment, which is the trailblazer assessment that we do, the initial long list in a category which is that niche and that new, we typically start with 30-40 platforms and we end up with 4 to 5 trailblazers. But this time, the initial list included more than 70 platforms, all focusing on variety of use cases, different segments. And as a pleasant surprise, we ended up with 23 platform providers emerging as trailblazers. And and these are truly, and I truly believe, in these smaller pockets is where you see the biggest of innovations happening. This is where we also learn, what is coming up, what are next gen functionalities that are going to change the landscapes in next 2 years. For example, what is happening today, right? So these uh, now relatively bigger next gen platforms, they were small, 2 years back. They were doing innovation back then. Similarly, we did this assessment, and these are some of the categories where we see these new gen platforms emerging. They are doing innovation in these pockets. And again, I would like to throw this question to our audience, right? If you can see these four different categories. So these are the four categories that we identified when we sort of sliced and diced the new set of trailblazers, the 23 trailblazers that emerged from the assessment, into which categories are they going after, right? So no points for guessing. Omni-channel engagement is the most talked about category. This is where we see maximum number of technology platforms which are specific to life sciences emerge, followed very closely by analytics and AI, which we have labeled as intelligence layer. And then again, learning and training and content, while you see them as 3 and 4, but they are very close to 1 and 2. So these are the four pockets where I would say a lot of innovation is happening. This is where a lot of these platforms, smaller platforms targeting a couple of use cases but doing really great work, they are emerging. And this is where a lot of funding is also flowing for these platforms. So that was, or rather, that is one of the more recent research outputs that we have. And for all the people joining in, tuning in for this LinkedIn Live, we have the complimentary offer. I think you will get that link. You can download a complimentary abstract of this report that will give you an insight into these four categories, these four segments, who are some of the top players in these. And this is where my question to the audience is, if you can name, say, top one or top two platforms across all of these layers which you see making impact, or which you think will make a lot of impact, say, next 1 to 2 years across these four categories within life sciences commercial.
Thank you, Rohit. And as you mentioned, right, we are offering a complimentary abstract of this report that Rohit authored. In that report, you would also see the names of the all of the trailblazers and the starting long list. So, if this is something that is of interest to you, please follow the instructions in the chat. Now, we are a little behind time, so I'll speed us up a little bit. Rohit, I'll pick up on one of the things that you said during the earlier part of the conversation around how Salesforce is positioning itself, right, as not a CRM player, but as a engagement platform. And if you look at Viva and if you look at some of the other, there's different ways of how they are positioning themselves. And I think what that does is that does create a degree of confusion in the mind of their buyers. So I think so the question to Rohit, to you is, how can we simplify this, right? So if you look at whether that's Salesforce, Viva, or someone else, and when you look under the hood, what are the key capabilities that you expect to see?
Mm, that's a good question, Chunky. And I think lucky to have this infographic right there. And like I mentioned, the traditional ways of working, they are changing. They are changing real quick. Even enterprises, they have now started thinking on these lines. They also want, next gen experience, how to drive customer experience. They are not only looking for a system of records. So this is a beautiful transition to how these were the four pockets or four segments that we saw emerging while we looked at, where is innovation happening, where are a lot of these niche platforms coming up. And I think these are the four segments, these are the four pillars which are constituting to the next gen customer engagement platform. Like you see in this graphic, right? The CRM or the traditional data layer, that is a happy marriage that is sitting at the base of it. And that is something where enterprises will invest and forget if it is a standalone tech stack. But the real value, the real cynosure of everything that is happening, that is the middle layer, which is the customer engagement platform layer. And we have already talked about the four categories or four segments that are emerging: omni-channel, analytics, content, learning, and training. I think on top of that, this is very similar to how Salesforce announced, or even how Viva will eventually transition to, is by bringing all the commercial functions on a common unified platform, be it sales, marketing, market access, medical, patient services. So all these functions need to come together. They need to be updated in real time of what is happening where. They need to be speaking the same language. So no silos. There's no space for any silos in the future tech stack for life sciences commercial. And on top of it, right, this is the view that we created, for the customer touch points during or right after COVID. All the touch points are important. While they were important from multi-channel marketing standpoint back in pre-COVID era, they were important for omni-channel standpoint during and after pandemic. I think these touch points and may- bringing out harmonies in how we engage customers across their preferred touch points. I think that is what will drive building this next gen customer engagement platform and the future tech stack in commercial.
Thanks, Rohit. And in terms of what are you hearing from buyers, right? So these are the capabilities that like we think CRM, or not, let me not say CRM, let me say the which should be a part of the future tech stack. But what is the feedback that you're hearing from buyers on this?
That is an interesting bit, right? So again, we'll do another LinkedIn live, 6 months from now. We will talk at length of how someone, say, player A has announced something, they are integrating Gen AI to bring in personalized engagement, so on and so forth. But the true picture lies when we speak with enterprises. Like Chunky, you mentioned, they are in three stages, or that is how we expect them to evolve. Either they are thinking of, what the future tech stack looks like, or they've already made up their mind what to go after, or if they are mature enough, they are thinking about how to fill the gaps. So if you zoom out a little, you see this is not a very pretty picture. If they're still thinking, and majority of them are still thinking what the future tech stack will look like, that means they are not very happy with what they are using currently, or they are using hundreds of things, they don't know which one to choose. So I think that is the summary of what I hear when I speak with enterprises, when I collect feedback on player A versus player B, or what are their sentiments around different outputs that they expect from the platform. And if we get to that graphic, yeah, this one right on time. So we see that platforms, the things that they were doing 10 years back, the managing the operational aspect of it, that is improved. That is where these platforms are rated well. But the promise of future, right? Delivering superior customer experience, providing real time insights, providing actionable next best actions, or anything on the lines of, say, providing the next best learning experience. I think these are functionalities where enterprises are still not happy. They are not seeing that happening on ground. Maybe there's a lot of chasm in terms of how they are adopting these platforms. Maybe these platforms have not reached to right stakeholders yet. Maybe those stakeholders are not well trained to adopt these platforms. Those are some of the questions that we are still investigating. But while these pointers have moved a little over the last 12 to 18 months, but I would have really loved to see a lot of these parameters north of, say, 7, 7.5. So yeah, I think when we speak next, or maybe when we speak in 12 months time, hopefully some of these needles have moved in the right direction.
And for the audience, you can find these insights in our customer experience platforms adoption playbook. Again, as a complimentary offer for joining this LinkedIn Live, we are offering a complimentary abstract of that. So again, if you found these insights interesting, you can follow the instructions in the chat. Now, let's turn our attention to 2025. So, what I'm suggesting that we do is each of us, so the three of us that are on video, and also the audience, everyone in the audience, everyone gets one prediction for 2025. So, for the audience, if you have one prediction for 2025 for the life sciences commercial space, please share your thoughts. And Durga, why don't you kick us off with what is your prediction for 2025?
All right, I get only one, so it's a little sad, but let me, make that about content. I think it's the most overlooked piece. Everyone talks about omni-channel engagement. Everyone's talking about real-time customer insights, but then, at the end of the day, you need content to engage your customer. You need to personalize the content to engage the customer. So I think this sort of a late realization that has happened in a lot of ways for even enterprises to not run behind the buzzwords, omni-channel engagement, generative AI, everything. People are going back to fundamentals in a lot of ways. So I think content is one of the fundamentals that enterprises are resorting to as well. I expect them to focus a lot more on content along with omni-channel engagement so that they're truly able to take that to fruition.
Okay. Rohit, you get the next prediction.
Uh, so I see Durga has taken the easier one away from me. So I would say, even when we do a similar session on the upcoming CEP report, so you'll see that scope has evolved a little. There are a lot of emerging functionalities that we see in addition to some of the core or established engagement functionalities. So my prediction for 2025 is that a lot of these emerging functionalities, such as end-to-end events management or say medical information management, these will become a little more mainstream next year. You know, they were they have taken a backseat because they were not a lot tech heavy sort of segments within the entire uh, comtech landscape. But now with conferences making a great comeback, with a lot of integration between medical teams and commercial teams, I think these some of the emerging functionalities, say end-to-end events management of these hybrid events, conferences, how to deploy technology to medical information, is there scope to involve gen ai use cases in medical information. I think these some of the emerging functionalities which are emerging in 2025. I expect them to really accelerate and become mainstream in 2025.
Okay, so my prediction is around funding activity. So I expect the funding activity to pick up. I think 2023 was, by all accounts, probably the worst year in the last five from a funding activity perspective. Things haven't significantly changed this year, so I expect funding activity scenario to improve next year. And as a result of that, what I also expect is, I would say, better categorization of this industry. So I think one of the things, like at least the three of us have discussed, is how everyone's doing omni-channel, everyone's doing analytics and AI. But if you actually look at what they're doing, they're significantly different from one another. So I don't think there is, like, from an industry perspective, there is detailed or good categorization which the industry has done for itself. And when these companies look for funds, this is obviously a question that their investors would ask of them. This is also a question that their buyers would ask of them. So this is what I expect. I expect the funding activity to increase. And I would say over the next 2 years, I also expect better categorization of the life sciences commercial market. Uh, I think we are nearing the end. So maybe like one other question to Rohit. What? So this is an area that where we obviously keep on publishing new research. Do you want to give a sneak peek of some of our upcoming research pieces?
Sure, sure. I think we are in for interesting times ahead. Very, very soon, the next iteration of next gen customer engagement platform Speak Metrics Assessment, which is our flagship assessment in this area, that will be out 2 to 3 weeks from now. Again, keep an eye out. It will have the latest positioning of incumbents, emerging platforms, some of the niche platforms, some of the specialists on a single image. So that is the annual assessment that goes out. So that will be out in 2 3 weeks from now, and seeing how the chatter around how the services landscape needs to evolve around Veeva-Salesforce. So on that, we are doing the life sciences CRM services state of the market report. That should be out, early 2025. And on similar lines, we are bringing back the Viva Services Peak Matrix Assessment. We did that back in 2021. I think 2025 is the perfect time to bring it back. So Viva Services Peak Matrix Assessment, that will be launched soon, I think early November, and that should be published in again H1 2025.
That's great. So I think let's go to some of the questions or comments we have received. So we have one question from Claude for Durga. And Claude wants to, Durga, he wants to hear your thoughts on future commercial engagement models, particularly when some organizations are thinking about a rep-free commercial experience.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think there was a lot of talk right around the pandemic around repless model, but that did not pick up for all the right reasons and the good reasons, in my opinion. But I think here's what I think. Right, it can be rep free, but it depends on what in what context are we talking about. So let's say it's about maybe just sharing some quick update on the product or sharing some training educational material. That is something that can become a rep free commercial experience, because you can look at adopting digital channels there, look at sending over emails, look at making sure that this pops up on social media for all the right reasons. So again, that's where you can deploy a rep free experience. But I wouldn't say necessarily say you need to deploy rep free experience when you're talking about the value proposition of the product to the healthcare provider, or you're talking about what's your competitive differentiation. So rep free experience, I would say yes, but it depends on the context of the discussion at hand. So again, in the future, we'll definitely adopt a combination of rep free, rep augmented, rep only experiences. But it's all about in what context are we talking this about? Who's the end audience? What's the context of the discussion? All of that comes into picture.
Great. And there's a question for Rohit around market access and patient services.
Uh, I think we listed 5 functions: sales, marketing, medical affairs, patient services, and market access. And I named them in the order of these functions' readiness to adopt these digital solutions. And I think we covered this in the previous slide, but a quick refresher is that, sales and marketing, and predominantly sales, that is the favorite child when it comes to commercial functions. So everything is focused on the sales function. So I think now enterprises and even providers have started moving beyond sales and marketing, and medical affairs is the first function that they're going after in terms of digitizing it, making it more modern, bringing it into the jazzy digital space, followed by patient services in 2024. I think we got a lot of inquiries around, hey, what is happening in patient services? Partly because Salesforce has a very good module which focuses at patient services. And since Salesforce announced the life sciences cloud, and they included patient services as one of the key modules there. So I think that is where chatter picked up. And this is where we have started seeing platformization happen for in very select segments, so to speak. But again, this is an area which is very services, very operations heavy. It will still some time for patient services to come at par, even say with medical or marketing. And the last in this line is market access. Right now we don't see any platform focused investments happening here. There's a lot of AI and automation pieces going on, but an integrated module for market access, or for that matter for all of these functions, that is the north star. That is the future tech stack of commercial in life sciences, is what we are picturing it out.
Okay, and I think with that I think we are near the end. So once again, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. Uh, I hope you had a good time and see you again in 2025. Take
Yeah,
care.
thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.